Hey friends, my name is Mitch. Thank you for joining me for starting the details on the lion. So today we're breaking out the pastel pencils and doing some details on this lion. So again, this is on pastel matte paper, and we're using Pitt pastel pencils along with Carbothello pastel pencils, and we're just going around and making the eyes at this point. So obviously the eyes are going to be the most important single thing you're going to do on your drawing or painting, because especially with a predatory animal looking straight at you, your eyes are going to go straight for the animal's eyes. So here I'm just trying to figure out the pupil, and it's better to start off smaller than you think you need rather than making it gigantic and going back and trying to erase. So when I did the outline, I did get a couple of mistakes, so I had to go back and erase a little bit of that. You'll see that here in a minute. But for the most part, you're going to do a black pencil with the eye, and then you're going to go back with the soft pastel as well. So here I'm getting a stump and blending out the green. So I did a light green Carbothello pencil, and then I did a greenish yellow Carbothello pencil for the inside underlayer there. So just doing those two and trying to get that nailed. The eye takes a lot of time, unfortunately. So that's one thing with pastel matte, is you can't actually erase it. So that's good news, because with other papers, like some of the fiber-based papers, it's really hard to erase, and you end up just ruining the paper rather than getting a good erase in. So here I am trying to erase it, get the eye more rounded, going back in with the light green, and then blending out with the stump, going back in with the lighter greenish yellow, and doing the same thing with the stump. So lesson learned from the first eye on the left there: do the pupil last, because if your pupil, when you start blending with that stump, if you touch that pupil and the black dust gets into the bright, pretty part of the eye, it's almost impossible to get out. So it's best that you get the eye, other than the pupil, get it down, and then come back later and get your pupil in, get your black pastel, etc. come out through there. So here I'm just blending it out, getting everything in, and then once I get that, I want to go back and get the outline a little better. So that's one of the things you have to be pretty picky about, is the outline of the eye, because that's going to sort of define the eye, especially in a lion that has this much shadow and darkness to it. It really pops with the shadows, with the darkness. And that's one of the big things about this particular lion that you need, are those shadowy areas. Because if you can't get those, then it's just going to look lame and not as good. So here I'm coming in. One of the things you want to do once you get the pupil down is to soften the edges. So, I mean, there's no pupil that's going to be a hard edge. So you just get the blending stump, you go around and just soften that edge, and it really brings it to life. You can see the pupil on the right is a little bit too small, so I tried to adjust it here, and I went back later and adjusted it even more, because it looks sort of cross-eyed. Not much you can do about that. So now there's like a brown area underneath, right next to the outside of the eye. So I just put that in. I got a new stump. It just blended that out. So you have the brown thin lines across there. So just to go on a quick rant about this whole thing, I just wanted to go and do a detailed small hairs painting / drawing of a lion that's large size, 13 by 19, so it takes forever. But normally I wouldn't do all this stuff, and the reason is because once it's behind a frame, you can't see those little hairs. you can't see that detail. So that goes back to my original method of the velour and going back with the pastel pencils and doing a bunch of stuff with soft pastels, etc., etc. And then you come back with your colored pencils and you make the defined hairs here and there, and it gives you an optical illusion of a lot of detail without putting in a lot of detail. So this size painting in my method would take about 3 hours, and this one is going to take about 15 hours. So you choose. I mean, other than somebody getting up to the drawing about 1 foot away, you're not going to really see all that detail. But it looks great on social media. Hey, so just wanted one of these. So I just went back with a soft pastel that was Giro 513, which is actually dark green, but it's super, super dark black. Really, really dark. And I love that pastel. So I went back and just touched the outside of the eye and the inside of the pupil of that to give it that deep, deep darkness. So obviously it's still too light. We'll go back in there next video and fix that. But for now, here we go with the small hair details. So I'm getting the black color pastel pencils. I'm sharpening really sharp. So here's the tans. So let's talk about tans and browns. If you're gonna do hair, all right, here's my best hair tip. And I'll make a separate video about this showing you more details, but in general, you want at least 3 to 5 colors. So if you have a tan, a light brown, you want 3 to 5 of them. You don't want one. If you have one tan pencil, if you have one dark brown, and you do your whole painting, it's gonna look flat. It's gonna look lifeless because you need a variety of color, and your eye will pick that up. Even though you can barely see it, your eye will pick up that richness from the different tans and the different browns. Like you'll see, like right here, this is a really saturated brown. And then I go to a reddish tan, and then I'll go to a desaturated brown. Well, no, I'll go back to the reddish. Yeah, here's a desaturated brown. And like the mixture of this really, really brings it to life. And that's important for you to do that, as well as make the hairs different shapes, different sizes. You want to make a long one, a short one. You want one that's sort of fat at one end. You want some that are straight. You want some that curl in different directions. And once you combine the colored richness with the variation in size, and you can do that by pressing hard on some, pressing light on others, etc. So between those, you end up with a very, very beautiful, rich, velvety set of hairs that look photorealistic. And that's what you want, right? You don't want a flat painting that has like 3 colors. So it's important here to get that variety. So you can see here I have a yellow almost, and then I go back to this reddish tan, and then I go back to white, then I go back to dark brown, then I go back to desaturated brown, etc., etc. So that's essentially just all I'm doing at this point, just replicating what I see. So I use this color a lot. I think it's called the 100 or something. It's a tan, but it's really, really, really light. And if you look at the reference photo, that's what you have. I think in the old days, for that particular spot in the old days, I would have reached for white. I would have said, hey, it's a light color, let's go with white. And that would have been a brutal mistake. And I know you're saying, wait a minute, wait. You did base coats, and the base coats are sort of the right color. Why can't you go over with white? And again, because it just blasts out the color and ruins all your beautiful color variations. So don't use white, don't use black for hairs. You need something other than that. You can't go with black and white and make all your hairs with that. It just looks flat. And again, we're coming back with that stump you just saw. And the stump is important. All that is a rolled up piece of paper. And you can use, a brush. You can use anything that'll spread the pastel around and shove it into the paper more. So that's essentially what the stump is. And what the stump will do is make your hairs not as defined. So if you have these beautiful thin hairs in an area and you want to make them less defined, you get the stump and you roll it over it. So that's useful for a variation of hair widths, right? So let's say you've made all these detailed hairs and it looks the same across the whole gamut. So to give it some variety, you can get a stump and you can come in and just jam it into a little bitty area of those hairs, and it'll flatten it out a little bit. Not a lot, but it'll flatten it out enough to now you have a variety. And now you have that, like I'm talking about, that nice variety of hairs. And you're gonna get that by getting the stump and jamming it over a couple of the hairs. Not the whole thing, but a couple of hairs here and there. Use your stump. Get it variety that'll blast out your hairs and make them wider. So wide, wider, thinner, that'll make them wider. And then around that, or on top of that, you can put thin hairs, whatever. So again, you have a variety. So you can see, like right here, around the eye, I have a nice variety. I have a little white, I got 2-3 tans, I got 2-3 browns, I got the black, I got a dark brown. I'm holding like 9 pencils. For this just one area, I'm using 9 pencils. So it's critical that you have that variety. So you can see here too, when you're making hairs, you'll notice some of the hairs are longer, some of the hairs are shorter. Sometimes I just make a dot, like I'll just make a dot on the paper, nothing but dots to represent shorter hairs or spots of, clumped hairs. So that's important too, just have that. Some are long, some are short. And I'll have people ask me, like, how do you do realistic hairs? And they'll show me their picture, and all they did was made the same hair over and over and over, same length, same width, same direction, over and over and over and over, and it doesn't look good. Because again, you're missing the variety in color, you're missing the variety in width, you're missing the variety in length. And again, I'll make another video about this and go detail. You see 9 pins in my hand. I'll make another video and go deep detail into this, make a deep dive. But for now, just remember, if you want to get realistic hairs, it's absolutely critical to have variation in color, width, size. Any variations that you can have, just throw it in. So here we're coming in with that pretty yellow, which is going to be sort of my tan-ish. And that does match, if you look at the reference, that does match it pretty good. So here we're starting in with the inside of the face, the innards of the face. So I'm getting my reddish brown Carbothello pencil, just making individual hairs, which is a monster waste of time. But I have not done that before. Wanted to do just one, just to have one, just to have it. Sort of like stamp collecting. You just want that one stamp you don't have. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I took a break. Oh no, I'm showing a pencil. If you want to watch my stream, guys, I do stream on Facebook. Find me under, obviously, as you can see on the bottom left, Mitch Ashford. Hunt me down. Stalk me on Facebook. Watch my streams. So here I'm coming in making dots. You can see these dots. So that's another thing. So you could kind of consider those a stripe at the top of his head. Never make a solid stripe. A solid stripe is a series of dots and blotches of different shapes, sizes. So never make a stripe. And you'll see that too. People ask me, what am I doing wrong? And they made a solid stripe. Don't do that. A stripe is not a stripe, it's a series of dark hairs, dark brown, black. And if you're going to make a stripe as well, don't make it all black. You want a deep brown, a sort of a mid-tone brown, some black. You want that mix. So here I am with the innards of the face. We're going back here with the saturated brown. This is a desaturated brown. Saturated means that it's more reddish, it's more deep, rich. Desaturated means it's not as red, it's more of a flat, colorless brown. So here on the nose, I'm going to go over with like 5 layers, which is funny because I already went with like 3 or 4 layers in the base coat. So you're talking about like 9 layers. And here I come in with a stump. Again, the stump gives you blurry hairs. They're not as defined. They're just a little blurry, they're a little wider. It makes it look nice, and that's what I wanted. So like right here, I'm coming in with this reddish brown, and if you look on the reference, there is no reddish brown. But after you come in with that stump, that reddish brown will blend into the other base coat brown, and it makes a beautiful, toned, nice, brown, rich, velvety color that will give your portrait some life. Here we go with the red brown again. And you're going to see me coming in with these desaturated brown, the red brown, a saturated, desaturated browns. Here I am making dots. The hairs on the nose are super small, so you just want dots. You don't want hairs, you want just dots. So here we're doing dots and making them curly, making some a little hairy, making some just dots, pressing hard sometimes, pressing light sometimes. A nice variety. So you see, look at that. That looks really nice. Then you come in with a stump, mash it down so it's not as defined. So you see that? So that reddish brown, the desaturated brown. Here I come in with the black to make the scar. You get all that variety, and I don't make a straight line with a scar. You'll notice I'm just making a series of dots. So you see that? It's just dots, but it's in a line. And then I press harder in the middle. In the edges, I press lighter. Now I'm coming in with more dots. And now I'm coming in with that pretty yellowish tan carbothello pencil and going in between the darks, so it blends it out. It makes a nice blend of color. So here we have the black and then the saturated brown mix as it will come into the lower portion of the nose. And again, I told you we're going to come back to that area of the nose and go over it like 3 or 4 times. See here, just defining the line underneath it, getting the eraser and getting some of the crookedness out of it, brushing off all the eraser dust, and then coming back on the white, and in between the white, you want the blacks, the dark browns, and just sort of getting that texture. Because everything when you're on an animal with a bunch of hair is about texture, right? The last thing you want is a flat, dull, lifeless drawing. Nobody's going to want to look at it. It's going to be boring. Don't do that. So here I'm coming in with the other eye, just duplicating the other, what I did before. So you have, if you look at the reference for this area, you have these dark hairs, and in between them you have a light hairs. So here I'm coming in with making the dark hairs. And again, some are curly, some are long, some are really short, some are just dots. So here I'm coming in with that light tan, coming in with a white. So again, like I said, color variation is your key, guys. The more browns you can put in a brown area, the richer, the deeper it'll be. And that's part of the reason I don't use all pan pastel. Pan pastel only has like 80 colors or something. That's not enough. I mean, you could look at some of these pastel sets and they're like 640 colors, and then you compare pan pastel with 80 colors. I mean, I used pan pastel in the background of this, but I also had to mix in some other brands of pastel because I didn't get the colors that I wanted. Because like I said, the more browns that you could put in, the richer, the deeper the picture will look. So if you only have 2 browns, probably not going to look too good. So you're coming in with the saturated brown. And if you look at the reference, that's desaturated. But I'm mixing the saturated with the desaturated, so I get a little more color depth to it. And again, that's your goal. Again, color depth. Here we're doing hairs. Some are a little longer, shorter. I press hard on some. I'm light on others. Now here I come in with a desaturated brown, and I go sort of in between the saturated brown. So now you have that nice mix. Now we come in with the tans, put in some hairs here. And you don't want to stump this with your little paper stump, because if you look at the reference, these are pretty defined hairs. They're not blurry. The middle of the nose, that's blurry. These hairs around this eye is crystal sharp clean. That's what you want. You want to replicate it, don't stump that. Leave it as is. When you go in the top part of the nose that's blurry, stump that. Get yourself some blur in there. So we come in with the white in between the darks, leaving that defined hairs. So here you come in with like a yellow. So it's like a yellowish, not a yellowish brown, it's like a yellowish tan. And that's in addition to the bright yellow tan I was using. So that's like 6 colors so far just on this one area. And the good thing about the pastel pencils is they're not expensive, right? I think you can get 60 for $60 off Amazon, shipped to your door for, if you got Prime. So $1 each, and the 60 set has like 10 browns, between the tans and the dark browns, the mid-tone browns, the light browns, the tans, the yellowish tans. So I have 9 colors in my hand, and I'm using all of them. So you can see that gives it the nice, deep, rich thing. All right, so as we come into the outside with these long hairs, we have a dark, shadowy area when it's next to the face. And then when you leave that, it gets lighter. So that's one of the things you want to do. A mistake I see some people making is you try to draw the entire hair all the way from the face all the way down to the bottom of the paper with one stroke. And you really can't do that. Maybe in a couple of hairs, but not all of them. Because if you look at the reference, the hairs change colors. They'll start out dark, where it's in shadow, and then it gets mid-tone in the middle of the hair, and it's light at the end of the hair. So you have to sort of replicate that, and you can replicate that with, pressing harder and then lighter, along with using different colored pencils in different stages. Because the outside of the hair, where the sun is hitting, is also going to be more yellow than the inside of the hair where it's shadowy. That's going to be more desaturated. So be careful with these long hairs. Don't just make one big long hair with one pencil. It's not going to work. All right, here coming in, just getting the shadow areas. So if you look at the reference, that's desaturated, but I just did saturated, but whatever, I don't care. All right, so now we're doing the big muzzle here. So on the inside, this is sort of confusing if you look at it. You have a mixture of white, 3 different, on the reference photo, 3 different tans, like 4 different browns. So sort of difficult to replicate this. So what I did, I just started out with a white, right? And turns out it's not white enough. Because if you look at the reference on the muzzle, on the bottom left of that left muzzle, sorry, the bottom right side of the left muzzle, it's really, really bright. And I couldn't get that with my pencil, so I had to break out the Giro white pastels and use those right there, because otherwise it doesn't look good. All right, so here we come in with this reddish brown. You see that area on the reference is red. That's a reddish brown hair. And then I'm coming in with that light, and one of the mistakes I made here was I'm using this light yellowish, whitish tan on top of an already light color. And if you do that, it looks way, way too light. My mistake, what I should have done is came in with a dark brown, established some dark brown hairs, and went in between them with that light. So what I do is I compensate for that later by coming in with the dark brown and putting it in. So learn from my mistake. See, look at this. It's light on light. It doesn't look good. Where's the darks? You don't see them. And then another mistake I made was these dots in the muzzle where the whiskers come out. They're not just balls like I'm making here. They're a series of hairs. If you look at the reference, it's a series of hairs. It's not just a straight ball of darkness. So I later came in, realized my mistake with the dark brown, and gave it some texture. So again, learn from my mistake. Don't make balls of darkness for where the whiskers come out. Make sure that you make those look like hair areas. And again, you can use your dark brown, your desaturated brown, your black. Mix it up. So again, you see that left muzzle is way too light. And I mean way, way too light. And then I'm coming in with this white, trying to replicate what I see. But in reality, the dots on the muzzle are too small. This is too light. So here I come in with the brown. I'm trying to fix this too light problem. So I'm trying to go over those dots and make them look more realistic. Turns out later I would need to come in with my Giro dark green and make those a little bit deeper and darker, because it just looked terrible right now. It's way, way too small, man. And they don't come in far enough either. If you look at the reference, the dots stop way too far away from the nose. They need to come in more. And I'll fix that later. So here I'm coming in with my Giro, which is a soft pastel, but it's a stiffer, harder pastel, so I can get some decent looking hairs with it. So that's what I wanted to do. I just need to brighten up that inner area there. Just not white enough, right? So that's way too white up on top, but I don't care, whatever. All right, so for the big goatee here, you don't want to make massive, long lines with this hard pastel. You just want these short, skimpy little lines with the occasional long hairs. Some hairs go to the left, some hairs go to the right, some hairs are straight. Some are long, some are thick, some are thin. You see that muzzle? That's beautiful. See, that's realistic hair right there. And again, I'll do another video about how to make realistic hair. It's so easy. So here I'm coming in, making the same mistake with these dots. They're all too small. And the whole thing is too light. I'll come in and fix that in a minute. So for the goatee down here, obviously you're missing some dark areas up on the top near the mouth. So I'm going to come in and fix that in a minute after I finish these muzzles. So here I'm coming in with this dark brown, trying to get a little bit of texture in there, make that scar. I'm trying to get the dots and make them bigger. And in reality, they're still too small. I'll fix those later. So now again, I'm realizing this is way too light, man. It's like way too light. So I'm trying to compensate, learn from my mistake, make them a little larger, make the dots a little larger, etc. So again, here, look at this. I'm coming in with this beautiful tan pastel, and I just lightened it up a little bit. I didn't go over the whole thing. I just lightened it up. Now I'm stumping those dots just to try to make them blurrier, because if you look on there, they're sort of blurry. So now I'm coming in with a 359 Giro, and that is a light blue. And I like it because it's a cool white. So it's sort of whiter than white. It gives a depth to a big white area. If you have a big white area, you need to add something. Be it gray, be it a bluish white, something. You can't have an all white area. It looks like trash. So here again, I'm coming in between these white whiskers with a black. You see that bottom area of the muzzle there? Looks really good because you have that dark area in between the whites. If it's just all white, it looks like trash. So here we go, going in between those hairs. See, I'm pressing hard when it's up top, and then I'm pressing lighter as I go down. So it's really thick and rich and velvety up near the mouth, and then as you come down, it's lighter. Look, I'm barely pressing. It's like gray. It's lighter and lighter as you come away from the central dark area there. So now I'm coming in with another white that's soft, and I'm just making these hairs that sort of pull out from the bottom there. In reality, I shouldn't have done that. I should have waited until I had the other hairs in there, but whatever. The problem is now I'm going to have to paint the background behind these hairs, and I'm going to have to go around these hairs, and it's going to be much more time consuming than if I hadn't done that. Learn from my mistake. Get your background first, and then do the hairs. Here again, I'm coming in with a super soft colored pencil, and I'm just making little hairs you can see that come into the mouth area. And now I'm breaking out the acrylic marker, making a couple of big white hair areas here and there. Nothing substantial. So now again, I'm trying to fix the muzzle. It's not as light anymore. It's got a little bit of that richer, darker to it. But the dots inside were still too thin. But now I think we're getting close to what I want on it. So now I'm coming on the outside. Now we're going up top, apparently. Whee! There we go. Now we start above the eyes. Going above the eye area again with the light brown, and then the dark brown, desaturated brown, mid-tone brown. So if you look at that area there, so this is a white, it's a bunch of light tan hairs. So if you'll notice what I'm doing, because that area right there is all light tan hairs, I went in with a dark brown first. So between the light tan hairs, you have a shadow, because the hair is casting a shadow because it's not flat. So behind the hair is a darker area, and so what I did was I installed a few darker, shadowy areas, and now I'm going back over with the lights. And that's important because you don't want to put lights in an already light area without having something else there. Otherwise, you can't even see it. So here, just coming in with again, I made the dark area, and on top of it, coming in with that light. See, even in this bright colored area up there, you're still going to have some dark, shadowy hairs. So you can see here I'm pressing down hard to make thick hairs, pressing down light to make thinner hairs. In my original technique too, you can paint an area with a destination color, in other words the final color that you want, and then you come back and fill in the gaps, otherwise called negative painting. So here I'm coming in with the Giro, I think it's 104 dark brown. That's the one I dropped on the floor, so the actual pastel is like really broken up, and it started shattering in my hand. Don't drop those on the floor, by the way. So now I'm just going to come in with a dark, and I'm going to go over it with a pan pastel applicator. Because if you look at it, that looks terrible, right? You can't leave it like that. So I'm going to blur it out. And over on top of that, I'm going to come in with a light pencil and make a really detailed hair. But for now, I needed a background that's darker. So that's what you just got. Now coming in with the pan pastel applicator and just smoothing that out, blurring that out so you'd have these blurry hairs. And on top of that, we're going to go back next time and put in the detailed hairs. So you see that? It's like a furry, blurry hair. So let's look at the final result here. Ta-da! So that looks pretty good for starting the details. Thank you so much for joining me again. Hunt me down on Facebook, watch my streams, hit like and subscribe, and I hope you guys learned a lot from this. I really enjoyed making the video for you guys, and join me next time for even more details. And the next time we're pretty much going to finish the painting at that point. So hope to see you there.